Hello and welcome to the Kongversation. Mini. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Dustin Jackson.
Well, Dustin, here we are. Didn't expect to be doing this. Didn't expect to be talking about this. Wasn't anticipating this at all. But we are recording this mini on Friday, October 18th. And last night, Nintendo of America announced on YouTube and social media that Banjo-Tooie is coming to Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack on October 25th.
Yay! Yay! Woo! Yeah, we like that.
Well, I know you like that, Dustin, because Banjo-Tooie is it's your favorite, right? It's your all-time favorite game.
Oh, I adore Banjo-Tooie. I don't love every single little last thing about it, but overall, the things I love about it are just, my favorite things.
You know, I think this will be a discussion a lot of people will be having over, well, the next week, the next month, throughout the rest of the year, as people rediscover Banjo-Tooie on NSO. Because I really do feel like Banjo-Tooie is both beloved, like absolutely adored, and some people revile it. And I love Banjo-Tooie, but I will admit it's not my favorite. It's not that little slice of heaven that I consider the original Banjo-Kazooie to be. And one of the biggest issues I've always had with Banjo-Tooie is it's so huge, it's so sprawling, it's so intertwined that if life gets in the way, it's very easy to kind of lose your place in it. And
right.
I've always maintained, especially once we got the original Banjo-Kazooie on NSO, that I think my opinion, how high I hold Banjo-Tooie in my esteem will wildly improve if I could play it with save states. Like play an actual release of Banjo-Tooie. I know there are ways to do it now, but to actually be able to play it on my Switch and just say, all right, I'm stopping here, but I'm going to save right here and I'm going to jump right back into it a little bit later. I think that's a game changer, and I'm really, really, really looking forward to revisiting it in this new context. And, of course, this is a huge deal, because, yes, Banjo-Tooie has been available on Xbox 360, on Xbox One, on the Xbox Series XS, via Rare Replay. It has been available as the XBLA version. But this is the first time in 22 years that the original Nintendo 64 version of Banjo-Tooie is officially available. And just like it was with the N64 version of Banjo-Kazooie almost 3 years ago, that is a huge deal, both for historical importance, preservation, but also my own nostalgia. If I'm honest, this is always going to be my preferred version of Banjo-Tooie. I know the XBLA version does a few things better, and it has a few flaws. And this is the version I first played, and so it'll always be my preference. But when it came out, one of the big issues people had with it was the frame rate. It kind of got raked over the coals. And honestly, I never cared about frame rate back then. I was just like, okay,
I was a dumb little kid. I was like, I'm talking to the fun cartoon animals. That's all I need. Now in retrospect, going back and playing the 64 version, yes, it is very chuggy, but at the time, it didn't even occur to me.
It's chuggy and chuffy.
Oh, like the guy from the video game.
Like the thing. So I didn't care about it back then. It might bother me now, going back to it after all this time, but it's just going to be great to have the music in sync.
Yeah, for the cutscenes.
The cutscenes, because that is one of the big hindrances of the XBLA version, is because of the timing differences. The music's not in sync, and it's irritating.
Definitely
it bugs me. And of course, this is the version with the original dialogue font. I really don't care for the XBLA dialogue. The font they use in that, it's just so far astray from what the original was, and it's distracting to me.
Right.
So this is great to have this back. This is the version with all of the unedited Donkey Kong references, because just to play it safe. I mean, Tooie XBLA came out in 2009, and that was probably the lowest point of the Rare Nintendo relationship, as far as that was right when they stopped making the handheld games, and they're just the biggest gulf between the two at that point. So
right.
Just to play it safe, they removed all Donkey Kong references. They slightly edited the little doll that Bottle's child is holding, and is all going to be back. Like the DKU edition of Banjo-Tooie proper. It's going to be back in our hands. And this is the version without a working stop and swap, where it's just the stupid little googly-eyed cartridges that you bust open, and you take those sad little miniature versions of the eggs to Heggy. You take the ice key to the little safe, and you get the Mega Globo, and that's it. That's all you get.
Right. But I don't think that's that big a deal in the long run, just because a lot of those things you got in that version aren't really applicable to, like, if you're playing it on a modern console like Xbox One, Series X, etc. Anyway, like, you don't get the dashboard theme. I guess right. You do get the Xbox profile icons, but most of the rewards you could just get in this version anyway. It is a little bit of a bummer that I can't say have save data from Banjo-Tooie, use that and go back into Banjo-Kazooie and go to Shark Food Isle. That was a fun little magic moment in the 360 version, but it's not a big deal at this point for these versions. Who cares?
No, as I said in my news article about this, stop and swap, or the lack thereof, in Banjo-Tooie is my most nostalgic disappointment. So I'm looking forward to just rediscovering it all over again. And honestly, I didn't really care for how they handled stop and swap in the XBLA versions. It was kind of neat that the feature was working, but getting nuts and bolts in the mix, I think, just convoluted it. And
I get that. Maybe you'll be nostalgic for the breaking open the game packs this time around.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just going to be nice to have that version just readily available when I need to get footage, and not have to worry about blowing off old cartridges and getting it like working with my N64 and my capture equipment. And I don't want to do that. That's too much work. But
right.
Of course, this is just a huge, huge deal for many reasons. One of them is that this now confirms that the Constellation prophecy from February, when they announced that whole massive drop of Rare games, and they had the other constellations in the starry sky outlining game boxes, and we were like, okay, we have this many Rare games to look forward to. Well, that quota was met with Battletoads Double Dragon, and so now that we have Banjo-Tooie on NSO Plus Expansion Pack, we've blown past that. So the Constellation prophecy, if it was indeed them hinting that there are more Rare games to come, it wasn't a finite number. It wasn't them showing, this is how many you have to look forward to, and then that's it. We're
so far beyond that now. We're one game beyond that now.
one game, but it's a huge game. I mean, no offense to the golden oldies of pre-Donkey Kong Country Rare. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say Cobra Triangle doesn't compare to Banjo-Tooie, but maybe I am saying that, Dustin, because if we're all honest with each other, no slight to Cobra Triangle or, you know, Solar Jetman or any of those, there is a marked difference between 1994 onwards Rare and everything before, and especially what it means to have something like Banjo-Tooie on a Nintendo console once again. Banjo-Kazooie was a Nintendo property from, 1997 when it was announced to September 2002. It was a Nintendo property. There was no hemming and hawing. Well, actually, it's a Rare property. Now, it's a Nintendo IP during that time.
Right.
Rare did have some ownership, right? But it was presented as these are new Nintendo characters. These are new Nintendo IPs.
I mean, in Diddy Kong Racing, they had to say Banjo licensed by Nintendo.
That's right. So I will always think of Banjo-Kazooie, the brand, as a Nintendo property. Even though I respect that Rare is no longer with Nintendo, at least as far as the, you know, Nintendo has a minority stake in the studio. I respect that. I'm not hung up on it. But what always bothered me was the whitewashing of the history, of pretending like those years never happened. And obviously, you know, Nintendo just can't do stuff with Banjo-Kazooie. They need Rare's permission, and I get that, but I don't like memory holing lived history. I don't like memory holing any history and rewriting it, but especially history that I lived, I experienced, I felt so passionately about. So to have this trailer, oh my God, they put a little effort into this trailer, Dustin. It wasn't just your stock standard NSO announcement trailer. They put some bells and whistles on it. They don't do this often. They do this for some.
They did do it for Banjo-Kazooie when they put it up, though. They put some love into these Banjo trailers.
And GoldenEye, they know this is a big deal, right? Like, it's
exactly.
They know that there are.
It's not Iggy's Wrecking Balls.
There are fans out there who never got over the buyout, or who, you know, felt so passionately about this era of Nintendo that to have Banjo-Tooie back on a Nintendo console, oh my God, it's great. It's so like comforting. It's like relief. It's like when you really have to go to the bathroom and you finally make it, and it's just like that tension is gone. And
right, you deserve a gold medal for making it to the toilet.
Yeah, to have 22 years holding it. Jeez, it's amazing there wasn't some sort of medical calamity that resulted from it. But
well, what I think is, I was thinking about this earlier, how like the DKC games are huge, but there were those, Killer Instinct, but Rare wasn't like, arguably wasn't a massive part of the Super Nintendo line. Like, obviously it was with the Donkey Kong Country games, but, you know, there were lots of other games to fill out the Super Nintendo catalog. But the Nintendo 64, Rare is like half your heavy hitters. Like, Nintendo had a bunch of games, but if you can't have Rare games on your N64 service, you might as well not even have an N64 service. They're a massive part of that.
Yeah, and the Nintendo 64 was mostly like the big Nintendo EAD games, and you had the Pokemon cash-ins really to ride that wave, and then you had Rare. I mean, those were basically the three pillars that kept the N64 relevant in the face.
Exactly, and there were some third parties, but not a whole lot. Those really were the big ones.
Yeah, and it's one reason why the N64 is probably remembered more fondly in the West than it is in Japan. Not to say that there aren't very devout Rare fans in Japan, because there certainly are, but I'm just looking at like the numbers, right? The metrics of what was popular where. And yeah, I mean, it really is nice to see them, strike these deals with Rare. The copyright said 2021. I don't know if you noticed that, Dustin. So
that's interesting.
It's interesting. Like, how long have they been, keeping this one under wraps here? We're like, anyway,
is that around? When did the first game go up on Switch Online? Was it 2021?
That's when they announced
was it later?
Banjo-Kazooie. They announced it in September 2021 and went live in early 2022.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and yeah, we got some people in the chat. Hello to Porygon Q, Dre, Andre, Me Muppet, Freezer, March Rose. Hello.
Wow, a lot of people turning out for a mini.
For a mini where we talk about an announcement of a game that's 24 years old, but Andre points out that people have noticed that the trailer footage seems to have cleaned up frame rate, and
that makes sense.
There is the question whether or not we will see a repeat of the XBLA opening cutscene debacle. And hello, Malik. Malik just joined us.
Hello.
I don't know. It's possible. One of the things I've questioned about why it's taken so long to see Donkey Kong 64 on NSO Plus expansion pack is Rare compensated for the slowdown in DK64 and like made certain challenges in the game like dependent on the slowdown. I think the Mad Jack boss fight is one of them. And so when it came to the Wii U Virtual Console, you didn't have that, and it was miserable.
Nightmarish.
Yeah. So, it remains to be seen if they're going to tweak anything like that, or if they have tweaked it, because generally Nintendo doesn't like to put any effort into these emulations.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I was discussing this with our good friend Mitchell Wolf the other day.
Yes.
And we dug up a post that talks about how Majora's Mask on NSO has a more steady frame rate when you're actually playing the game, but they went in and slowed down the frame rate for the cutscenes so they would stay in sync. So I could see something like that also happening for Banjo-Tooie.
We've mentioned before on the conversation that the Nintendo Switch Online team is very, very small, like two people in a shed, in like the tundra, and they get their mail delivered by Saint Bernard like once a month, but they've got very minimal resources to work with, but I do think that they're passionate about making sure that the quality is there. I know there are a lot of criticisms about NSO as a service.
I feel like usually those criticisms are addressed in updates. Usually. Yeah. I mean, I haven't played a whole lot of games on the 64 service yet, but from what I've heard, they usually go in and fix them if they're like big ones people are talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really had too many issues with NSO other than I don't like the border. But speaking of the border, that miserable grayish border that's on all of these classic games, Banjo-Tooie is going to support its widescreen mode, which wasn't expecting that. Did Perfect Dark on NSO? I don't
know if Perfect Dark did it, but I do know Jet Force Gemini did it. Jet Force Gemini does support the widescreen. Oh, Freezer says Perfect Dark did.
Perfect Dark did. Okay. Clearly, I haven't really spent much time with Perfect Dark, but I never played the original N64 Banjo-Tooie in widescreen mode because I did not have a widescreen TV. Most people didn't back then. So
I didn't even know that was a feature on the 64 version. Cameron told me the other night that, yes, that is in the N64 original.
Yeah, I knew that, but I just never bothered with it because I was like, well, that's what rich kids have. Like that's a luxury I will never get to experience. So the standard definition, the standard aspect ratio is what I am used to with this version of Banjo-Tooie. And I'm very adamant about that. One of my biggest pet peeves, Dustin, is when people will stream or emulate the original N64 Banjo-Tooie, but they'll stretch out the screen. Like, they won't use widescreen mode, but they'll just stretch out the standard definition to make it artificially widescreen. I'm like, what are you doing?
That's yucky.
It's so gross. But I'm very intrigued because I associate widescreen mode with the XBLA's Banjo-Tooie. So to get to properly experience the N64 version in widescreen for the first time in my life, now that, all of our TVs have this wider aspect ratio, it's gonna be pretty sweet, and I'm glad the feature is there. I'm glad that they are doing this for the games that support it.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I would say the widescreen is one of the bigger pros of the 360 remaster. And so to have that there, that already closes the gap between the two a good bit. The other will be the frame rate, which we'll see. But if that's fixed and you can play in widescreen, that really is probably the best version of Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah, it's obviously gonna still pale visually to a lot of the XBLA version, but I don't really care because it's an N64 game at heart. So
yeah, plus it's a game you're already used to. You've played the 64 version. You know what to expect from it. It's not like you're playing a inferior version of a newer game.
Yeah. And Freezer points out the health HUD won't be fuck ugly like it is on Xbox. True. Yeah, I don't mind the XBLA versions. Let me just clarify. I've always been really glad they're there.
I love the fixes they do for the 360 versions for sure. They just have some small issues.
I've always been a first time around kind of person, right? Don't gussy it up for me after the fact. I will always prefer the original version of a game over any remake or port. The only one that might flip for me is Yuka Replayly, where it looks like they are improving quite a bit that needs to be improved, and so that might actually be the definitive version of that game for me. But generally speaking, you can add all this stuff, you can upgrade the graphics, but I will always go back to that first game. Not to say I don't appreciate ports and remakes and remasters, but I fall in love pretty hard the first time around, and so
I get that.
It's kind of hard to lead me astray, but another reason this is so exciting, Dustin, as I already alluded to, we've now blown past the Constellation prophecy, which means it's all on the table.
It's all on the table, and there really isn't that much left.
There really isn't. I've been kind of laughing all year because there have been no DKU Rare games being added. And it has always been Rare on Switch Watch. It's not a DKU game, but I got to do a news story about it because, I
here's Snake Rattle and Roll for you.
Yeah. Jet Force Gemini came out last year. It's always been exciting. And because you're always hoping this will lead to that thing you really want. And for me, the things I really wanted on NSO, Banjo-Tooie. I'm not going to include Donkey Kong 64 in this because Donkey Kong 64 is a different kettle o' fish. It's, owned by Nintendo primarily. They have to go through Rare and Microsoft, to get a few things approved, which they did on the Virtual Console. They've done it before. They'll do it again. Donkey Kong 64 has never been like this white whale,
Yeah.
So it's been Banjo-Tooie, and of course, the one that's near and dear to my heart, the basically foundation of the entire DKU, Diddy Kong Racing. Diddy Kong Racing, a game that has not been available again for longer than Banjo-Tooie has, because it went away when Conquer came out, when Bad Fur Day came out. Diddy Kong Racing kind of crept into the shadows, and Diddy Kong Racing is a game that has not been commercially available, minus Diddy Kong Racing DS, which let's all be brutally honest, does not count. Diddy Kong Racing has not been commercially available since 2001, if not maybe a little earlier than that. And it was such a huge, huge part of Nintendo's library, like the early to mid N64 years, Rare, the Donkey Kong universe. I mean, it means so much to DK Vine and to the fandom. And I've wanted Banjo-Tooie for all the reasons stated on this mini, but Diddy Kong Racing is the one that will lead to jubilation, to dancing in the street. It will really be, I think, one of the biggest news stories of the year it gets announced, whether it's, later this year or 2025. And there's going to be a lot to compete with it in 2025, I realize, if it does happen then. Because we've got the Switch 2, we've got Donkey Kong Country, Universal Studios, Epic Universe, we've got so much up in the air, but I don't know, just having Diddy Kong Racing playable again and to be able to introduce it to almost 3 generations who have not gotten to properly experience it will be a huge, huge deal. And getting to play it online, getting to play Diddy Kong Racing online. I mean, we're talking about Banjo-Tooie. Obviously, one of the draws of this is we're going to get to play Banjo-Tooie multiplayer online. That's not really a draw for me because I don't really care all that much. It's cool.
I might care more to be able to play it with friends. Like, one of the reasons I didn't care for it on the 64 version is there's only so many people like nearby who would want to play it locally.
Yeah.
But being able to play those online, that does make that multiplayer a little more attractive.
It does. It does. I shouldn't besmirch the name of Banjo-Tooie's multiplayer because I know some people enjoy it, but to your point, I didn't really have anybody to play it with. Like my friend Elliot, who I experienced a lot of the early DKU with, by 2000 he was starting to kind of move on a little bit, and so we played Banjo-Tooie together a little bit, but it wasn't like it would have been just 2 years before that. And Banjo-Tooie is also a game that kind of suffered when it came out because it came out near the end of the N64's lifespan, and a lot of people weren't buying N64 games by that point. So I saw it. Maybe it was Mitchell who brought this up too. Our friend Mitchell Wolf, who you mentioned. Mitchell.
I remember that guy.
Mitchell likes to talk about Banjo-Tooie, but Mitchell brought up that this might be the biggest audience Banjo-Tooie has ever had, given the install base of the Switch, how many people subscribe to Nintendo Switch Online. Obviously, it has been available on the Xbox platforms for 15 years now, but it's still...
The fact is, more people have a Switch than an Xbox.
And it was always more of a niche product on the Xbox. Obviously, the most feverish Rare fans got an Xbox and continue to get Xboxes for Rare, but a lot of people just stayed with Nintendo. So this is really Banjo-Tooie's chance to shine and to get reevaluated. And that's really going to be exciting to see. We're going to be doing a full episode about Banjo-Tooie. Wasn't expecting to do an episode about Banjo-Tooie in the last 2 months of the Kongversation season. But last night, like when this news broke, I was like, all right, well, we're going to do a mini about the announcement, and we are going to do a full-length episode after it comes out, kind of reassessing it all. I'm going to be doing that with Josh from Off of the Geek Critique, so that will be exciting. But yeah, I'm just pumped about like both how this is going to boost Banjo-Tooie, how this is going to like immediately put Diddy Kong Racing next on the agenda, right? Like the only N64 games from Rare that aren't on NSO plus expansion pack. Donkey Kong 64, which whatever, they'll probably get to. That's a Nintendo game.
That one's a given, basically.
Yeah. Conker's Bad Fur Day, which, you know, is more likely than it was.
It's not impossible. I don't think it's like a given. Like it's not a guarantee. But I could see it happening. I mean, they made that whole M-rated app, and that probably is one of the most iconic M-rated N64 games.
Right. They only have, 2 games in the app right now, so
yeah,
it's not really
it could happen.
It's kind of just there if you want to play Perfect Dark or Turok, but I think that, yeah, like the possibility is there. 3 years ago when they announced NSO Plus expansion pack and we learned about Banjo-Kazooie, I would have been like, well, there's no way Conker will ever.
Yeah, zero chance then.
Now I would say 40% chance, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. I could still see like someone at Nintendo being like, maybe we shouldn't. This seems like a thing that could catch a child's attention and still make them want to play it. But like it's such a huge Rare game that I could also see them saying, yeah, we gotta have it on there. We have it with Perfect Dark.
It's wild to me you said that because I kid you not, Dustin, the morning the day announced this, I was having my shower thoughts, right? You know, just your brain drifts in the shower and you
right.
have deep reflective thoughts. And most of mine are about the work day ahead, you know, what I'm going to do for DK Vine. And I was just thinking about Banjo-Tooie on NSO. And if we would ever get there, I was like, you know, it's been so long since we got Banjo-Kazooie announced, and we still haven't seen Banjo-Tooie. I wonder if someone objects to Banjo-Tooie for the same reasons like we will probably never see Mother 3 in the West. Just because, you know, Jolly Roger, there's some very overt gay jokes in Banjo-Tooie.
Right.
And Mary Maggie, of course. And it's like, there's nothing harsh. There's nothing that is, generally speaking, could be like misconstrued as gay bashing or transphobia or anything. But
right.
I think there's also just a lot of semen, it's it's done in a very lads having a laugh in the year 2000 context, and it isn't done with the, even the sensitivity that Jolly Roger in Nuts and Bolts got. I like the only dumb thing there was, I painted your house pink, Banjo. Get it?
Could you imagine a pink house?
But I was thinking, even though like there's nothing in Banjo-Tooie where it's just like we are objectively making fun of this gay man, this gay frog, you might want to step away from that, and maybe that was
right. You could see someone from Nintendo getting cold feet over even the slightest of innuendos.
Yeah, and so I was like, I wonder if that could keep it, from seeing release. And then there Jolly Roger was later that night on Nintendo's YouTube channel.
Front and center.
Front and center. And I was like, hell yeah, Jolly Roger. You love to see it. I was just like, sometimes the brain, I'm not saying I believe in psychic powers, Dustin, but I was tapping in to the energies yesterday.
I've had that happen before where like I think about something, I'm just like, oh, so-and-so happened, or just thinking about something I like. And then like that day or like the next day, some news will pop up that ties into what I was thinking about. Yeah. I've had that happen like a few times and I've been weirded out every time. I didn't have it this time, but I can relate to you, Hyle.
Yes. So anyway, getting back to my point, Conquer, 40% chance, I would say. Killer Instinct Gold still needs to show up, which I don't think anybody's too fussed about. I mean, it'd be cool to see, but I think,
it seems like one of those things that I put it kind of on the line of the Rare NES games where it's low stakes, it's not a real huge hype bringer, but because of that, I don't see anyone like having a problem with it either. I could see it just showing up one day out of the blue.
Right. I think getting the Super Nintendo port of Killer Instinct was a bigger deal for like what that version of KI meant for Nintendo back in 1995.
Plus, that's another one that's never been made available. That wasn't in Rare Replay.
Right, the SNES version, KI Gold's in Rare Replay, which you can play it there if you really want. Although you can also play Killer Instinct 2 properly on the Xbox too. So, but you got that. The one I don't think we will ever see, Mickey Speedway USA.
Oh, definitely not.
And that's just because of the Disney factor. I know, like, amusingly, I say that, and I know Disney and Rare have worked together twice now with Sea of Thieves, but
it's just getting a whole other third party in there.
Yeah. Like, it's already complicated things enough. We talked about how complicated Diddy Kong Racing is. Yeah. But generally speaking, all you need to do is have Rare and Nintendo say, all right, we're going to do it. And then it's done. It's right. It's not like you have to bring in the largest entertainment conglomerate in the world to haggle about your Mickey kart racing game from, what was it, 2000? Is that when it came out?
I think so, around that time. And like, weirder things have happened. It's not like, I mean, look, we got Sora in Super Smash Brothers. So Nintendo and Disney, they've talked. But I think the fact that there's like, I don't believe there's any licensed games on NSO.
Well,
maybe there are that I can't think of, but like, there's a whole ton of Disney games out there and none of them are up there. So
yeah, I just don't think it would be a priority for anybody.
Yeah.
No offense to the fans out there. I know people are going to be screaming at me because I'm just dismissing the Mickey games from Rare, but let's be honest, what most people think of when they think of Rare on the N64, that's going to be at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, but Malik just reminded me in the chat that they put the Quest for Camelot game for Game Boy Color on NSO. So, who knows?
Who knows? But Diddy Kong Racing is the one that, I don't want to say it's a sure thing. Like, I don't want to sit here and say it's definitely happening, because
nothing's a sure thing, but
that will jinx it. That will jungle jinx it. Dustin, with the tires going over the spikes and everything. Don't want to put out the bad, like, energy where I'm just like, yeah, it's definitely happening. You can take that to the bank, and then the metaphorical financial crisis hits where we never get DKR. But I think DKR, I would say, if we're weighing the percentages, Conquer 40%, I would say Diddy Kong Racing 90%. That
sounds right to me.
let's get reckless. You know what? I'll say 97% because
Whoa.
1997 is the year it came out, and that's just a lucky number as far as DKR is concerned. Yeah, it's almost done. And then, of course, we just have the handheld games, which...
who knows?
The Donkey Kong ones we'll get probably, right? Like Donkey Kong Lands. Right. We might even get the like GBC and GBA Donkey Kong Country games, but the ones that I think are still a long shot are the THQ4.
Right.
I just, as much as I would love those 3 cherished games and Banjo Pilot to come to the service, I just don't think, again, it's a priority for anyone. Only the biggest sickos out there are going to care. And I think it's going to be a similar situation to what THQ felt back when they published them as, well, it is enticing to get another Banjo-Kazooie game on the service. You know, that will bring eyeballs, that will bring traffic. If we could say, hey, here's Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. Most of you haven't played it, but it's a Banjo-Kazooie game, a proper Banjo-Kazooie adventure. So I think, like, if any get on there, it'll be that over It's Mr. Pants or Saberwolf, unfortunately.
Right.
You know, because those games are...
I'd love to have all of them, but yeah.
I mean, those games are superb, and Banjo Pilot is interesting. Banjo Pilot's got Espresso.
That's a game that was made.
Banjo Pilot's got Espresso, the ostrich in it, and the 2 ladies.
There you go.
It's got Jolly Roger in it, and there were no jokes about his sexual identity there. It was just, hey, here's
he's
Jolly
here to
Roger.
Be a pilot,
just
flying
here
around.
To be a pilot. We're not gonna, talk about, I don't know, the Mile High Club or whatever. We're gonna keep it tasteful because Jolly Roger is just a friend of Banjo and Kazooie, and we don't need to make everything about him about his sexuality. So I like that about Banjo Pilot. Clanker's River.
I mean, here people acting like Jolly Roger's sexual identity is his biggest thing about him. Have you forgotten that he's a talking frog?
We don't want to confuse the children.
That's crazy.
Because frogs can't actually talk, Dustin.
That's true. That's why that's a bigger deal.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
No. Banjo-Tooie is the... I talk about Diddy Kong Racing being like the thing holding up the entire Donkey Kong universe, and it is, but Banjo-Tooie, I would say, is the second most pivotal game. Because you talk about Saberwolf, well, Banjo-Tooie was the game that reintroduced Saberman in a modern context. Right. You talk about It's Mr. Pants, well, Banjo-Tooie was the first game to actually cameo Mr. Pants as a living, breathing character.
With all 2 frames of animation.
Hey, if it works for Donkey Konga.
That's true. It didn't work for Donkey Konga, actually. We were just talking about how much it sucked. But Mr. Pants pulls it off.
Banjo-Tooie really gave an identity to Royston the Goldfish, who would go on to cameo in so many games from Rare and Playtonic over the years.
Right.
Banjo-Tooie debuted Captain Black-Eye as a proper character, which is still paying off with Sea of Thieves. So,
love that guy.
The entire post-buyout history of Rare and the DKU was set up by Banjo-Tooie. And now it comes home. It comes full circle from the buyout through the Xbox years and back to a Nintendo console. Friday, October 25th. And as I said, we will be giving full coverage to this 24-year-old game here at DK Vine. Super Mario Party Jamboree came out, Dustin. And guess what?
Yeah.
I haven't actually taken it out of the shrink wrap yet because Like a siren calling me upon jagged rocks, I was led astray by, again, a 24-year-old game getting announced. And suddenly that becomes the bigger news story than the third Mario Party game on the Nintendo Switch.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's understandable. I'd be more excited for Banjo-Tooie.
We're still going to give our first impressions of Super Mario Party Jamboree, mind you.
Oh, totally. Hyle, do you want my first impression? I played it with the other Idahos the other day. It's fun.
Oh, okay.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.